This is the DRF Players Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Thomas Fornatel and Jonathan Kinchin.
Oh, yeah. There's the new intro of the DRF Players Podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatel, back with you for this show number 301, the January 16th, 2018 edition. I'm back with you. I'm bundled up in the Brooklyn bunker. It's still freezing down here, but for some reason we have a day off of school today, so upstairs is currently being otherwise occupied, so I had to come down here into the tundra. I have the hat on, not my usual fedora. This is like a woolly winter situation, pulled way down over the ears. The scarf is on. The sweater purchased in Scotland is on. It is cold down here. And somewhat surprisingly, it sounds like there's a weather situation in the place where my co-host is. You know him, you love him. He's the People's Champ, live from Vegas, Lexington, Kentucky. Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's going on down there?
You know, it's a little snowy here. It's a little snowy in Austin, Texas as well. There's been some school cancellations and carrying on down there. So I'm not sure, considering the weather, why I don't have pants on, but I do have a blanket on, so that's like the same thing, right?
Once again, we can put that in the JK TMI Hall of Fame. But yes, I think as long as just stay warm, stay with it for the show. We don't need any chattering teeth as additional sound effects. Speaking of sound on the show, I realized I was a little bit remiss. I gave props correctly last week to the voice of the Kentucky Derby, Travis Stone, who graces our new intro. Also, of course, to Willie Nile, whose song Dear Lord now comprises the intro. You can get more of his music at willienile.com. But I did not give props to producer AJ, who I just think did like the most fabulous job. And of course, I'm, a little snobby about, ironically, given the sound quality of the show sometimes, but snobby when it comes to sound stuff and editing, having grown up in a rock and roll milieu as I did. And I just wanted to say, AJ, fantastic work. We've got a lot of nice comments on the theme, and I had the kernel of an idea, and through you, it blossomed into something pretty special. You hear any comments on the new theme, JK? What are people saying?
Yeah, no, I think people like it. It's good. It's fun. Like when I pointed out that Travis was on it, I had a couple people say they didn't recognize his voice, but I guess that's because Travis hasn't been with us since Churchill, so we forget our announcers' voices. No, I think it's really good. We miss Todd, of course, but happy to have a new direction. I like that the singing of the song, the lyric that we hear the most is "Give me some money."
Oh yeah, that was the idea. I mean, the whole song is essentially a prayer to God to deliver money, which just struck me as something that every horse player has felt at some time in his or her life. Worth checking out that whole cut. It's on Willie's first album. Yeah, Travis asked me, what style are you looking for in the voiceover? And I said, you can go announcery, but I definitely want people to know it's you. And I think he nailed it. But yeah, it's sometimes with voice stuff, especially, it's a question of context. You'll hear John Hamm or whomever doing a voice in a cartoon, and you might not immediately recognize that it's him, but then once you know it's him, it sort of sticks with you all the more. Hopefully that'll be the case for those folks you were talking to. Certainly terrific to have Travis's voice gracing there, somebody who I've had the pleasure of knowing since he was just out of college. Another person, very similar relationship to John Panigott, who we've talked about on the show, who's the racing manager for Robert LaPenta, who I also met when they were working for the Saratoga Special just out of school, and I was an alum just looking for excuses to be in Saratoga for the summer and hanging around the special office. It's nice to see people, these young, talented people, making something of themselves in horse racing and really contributing something positive. Great. Just makes me feel warm and fuzzy to have him on there. So that's pretty cool stuff. So what's been going on down in Lexington, JK? You've been out at the Red Mile betting your face off, or have you been behaving yourself? What's been the situation?
Oh, of course not. I've been behaving myself. Obviously hung out with the Prince of Keeneland a bit this weekend. Infamous new character that we'll have to talk about, a gentleman by the name of Silky Wilkie.
I have no idea who you mean, but I'm very curious about this Silky Wilkie character.
Interesting guy, a guy that I met through Jake. Grew up in Lexington, is involved in horse racing a bit. Enjoys an adult beverage or two. So we hung out with little Silky Wilkie sightings happened. Anyone named Silky Wilkie is someone that you definitely want to make sure you hang out with.
I'd put him in the starting lineup based on the nickname alone. Yes.
And then yesterday I had lunch with our friend Sean Borman and Craig Bernick. So
nice.
at Malone's, which is a Lexington staple. So it was fun. Good. Nothing crazy, nothing major. Just a little hanging out.
I like it. It sounds good. Little bit of racing in my life this weekend, but a whole lot of running around. Been very happy to see the interest. Had a lot of conversations on Twitter about the new Mike Maloney book. Speaking of Lexington, Betting with an Edge. I have a limited number. We're now down to this next box of autographed by Mike copies. If you're interested, actually, if you're listening live, I could get it out to you today. I am going to make a post office run a little bit later. Hit me up on Twitter @LoomsBoldly or via the podcast email podcast@drf.com, and I can tell you how to get your signed copy. Of course, if you want to just keep it simple, go to the DRF store and you can order directly from there as well. But I just want to let folks know that there may be a little gap between when those books are available, and to let folks know about it. The Derby prep season, JK, it's kind of I'd say it's begun in earnest, and I say that because of one particular performance over the weekend. But I say we start the show by talking about those three races, the three Derby prep races from the weekend, and maybe have a quick look at some of the future betting lines from oddschecker.com on both the Derby, and then maybe we'll hop over to the Pegasus. We have a few reader questions to answer, a little story I wanted to tell. That'll probably be a show. Let's start off with the Jerome Firenze. I almost called him Frisian Fire. Firenze Fire gets it done. It was a very odd-looking race, I thought, coded slow throughout by Timeform US. As you predicted, Jonathan, kind of a weird track at Aqueduct on Saturday. It looked like a bit of a slog. The race came back with an 85 Beyer speed figure and a 99 Timeform US rating off of a 101 speed figure, downgraded a little bit for the slow pace, I would presume. Probably didn't make Arad Ortiz feel too bad about skipping the Mount to go down to Florida.
Yeah, I mean, look, the surface was obviously tricky. Our friend Nick Tamero, I think he tweeted that day, if you're betting Aqueduct today, you're braver than I am. And if you can get Nick to pass on a Naira card, there must be some real questions. I mean, I think the surface it even looked like weird. It didn't even look like it was just sloppy. It looked like it was like a kind of a tricky looking color. And anyways, look, I've tried to learn on this Derby prep situation not to make too much of these mile races or mile and 16th races. I also to try not to make too much of the races themselves, because these are progressive 3-year-olds that can change and improve, and you can sometimes form these really strong opinions and get kind of caught off guard. Seven Trumpets is the type of horse, and Firenze Fire the type of horses in the past I might be quick to dismiss. But I think I'll probably give both of them another shot just to see what they do on a fast track with a real pace, and see how that might change their performances. I mean, they might improve in those situations, but neither one of them vaulted to the top of my non-existent Derby watch list.
I think you did a good job in those remarks, JK, explaining why we are two of, it seems like the only pundits, at least the only pundits with podcasts, who don't bother with the Derby list, at least not at this stage. Later on, we'll do our little Derby draft, if only to get the taste of the Kinchin Slam out of our mouths. But it's just it doesn't. What's the best way to describe it for me? I just don't. I guess here it is in a nutshell. I don't feel like it helps me make any money to make a Derby list in January. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's one of our sports, if not our sport's biggest moments. It's the one that people that don't care about our sport care about. And so I get why people are so anxious to talk about it. And we are too. We're anxious to talk about it. I'm just not anxious to determine what's going to happen on the first Saturday in May, and the second, Tuesday or third Tuesday in January. You know what I mean? It just doesn't. I agree with you. There's nothing that we can talk about now that's going to somehow make us make money.
I'd rather.
And in fact,
go ahead.
I think that by making a Derby list and falling in love with horses is actually the opposite. Which has happened to me in the past. I fell in love with Verrazano and got absolutely nothing out of that. Fell in love with Sydney's Candy and got absolutely nothing out of that. So there's no reason, in my opinion, to be so, so cut and dry at this point. Just watch the races, evaluate them, take in information, and then wait till they draw the races and make decisions.
I like that. And of course, in analyzing these races, I think we're a lot more likely to come up for a horse to bet next time than 2 times from now at this stage of the game. I think that's fair to say, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how I try to look at it now. And I have to temper myself. I can be a fanboy at times.
You?
Of course. I got the silver wig. I had to get it delivered over here because I knew I wasn't going to be able to get out of here.
We'll mention that. We'll get to the silver wig next. Yeah, I don't think there's too much to learn. I talk about, we'll learn things for next time. Not sure there's too much of that to take out of the Jerome just because it was so weird. But I guess the thing would be what you said. Even if the figures aren't super high, et cetera, probably a race to just take with a grain of salt. And when you're looking at these horses, again, look at the body of work as opposed to focusing too much on the last race. All right, speaking of the silver wig, did you have it out yesterday? Were you jumping up and down the lane as Mourinho wired the Smarty Jones at 3-5?
I actually had the Jerry Hollendorfer silver wig. No, from Fairgrounds. No, I'm joking. No, I watched the race. Obviously, I didn't participate parimutually. I watched the race. Our friend Tom Lute was recently announced that he's going to be helping Phoenix Thoroughbreds with their racing endeavors. So I was rooting for the Luter in that regard. And then the horse himself. I think that we've talked a little bit about what California racing usually presents around this time of the year for the Triple Crown, and it's been some powerful form. Last year Battle of Midway was the best West Coast performer in the Kentucky Derby. However, he went on to win a Breeders' Cup race. So I think that what we see out west is usually a powerful contingent, and Moreno obviously
I'm going with
showed
Mourinho on this one.
Mourinho, right. I actually wanted to make fun of people for saying Moreno, and then I think I said it. Because it is after Jose Mourinho, right?
Exactly. You got a figure. And now I got you saying, I got you pronouncing Alcibiades wrong. I got you saying Moreno. You're in bad shape, my friend.
It's phonic intimidation is what it is. That's what you do to me.
I'll leave that alone. Right. So this race, let's talk about it a little bit. I don't think the buyer has been posted yet. Time form. This one I thought was very interesting. Another prep that was the fractions were slow throughout to the point where the raw number on Timeform US, if you look at the Timeform US lines that are now, of course, embedded in your formulator, the number all the way to the right in that Timeform pace line, the one with the color coding in it, if you're looking at it on the computer, the one all the way to the right, that's the sort of what the raw speed figure is. Now, that number is often different than the actual Timeform rating, that is more of a performance rating adjusted for pace that you'll see if you go onto the timeformus.com website, which I'm still using both. I love having those pace lines embedded in Formulator. I think it leads to a faster, easier understanding of the race, but I'm still also looking at taking an independent look at the races through Timeform US, using the pace projector and looking at these performance ratings. And this one, it says big, it's a very significant difference where that 122 got downgraded all the way to a 116 because of how slow the pace was. Horse wiring at 3-5, like, what can we tell, if anything, from this performance?
We can tell that Baffert's going to have the favorite in the Southwest. and that he could get Secret Circle to win those races. I don't remember exactly which three. Did he win all? Did Secret Circle win all three, or did he just win the Southwest and the Rebel? Or maybe it was the other way. Maybe it was the Smarty Jones in the Southwest. Long story short, if distance limitations aside, Baffert can win that race, and he's going to have the favorite. I don't think it tells a lot. It was a small field. There was nothing in there that I was running in line to bet against. So it's the same thing. It's like why do we need to find an opportunity to put Mourinho on anyone's list? Like, right? I mean, it's still early. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, if you're a combatant fan, you can certainly come away from that race with an excuse. That would be my one of my biggest takeaways. 5-horse field, loose leader. You can basically conjure an excuse for anything that was running in behind. Just for the record, JK, Secret Circle won the Southwest and the Rebel before finishing second in the Arkansas Derby. Can you name the horse that throttled him?
That beat Secret Circle?
Yeah, in the Arkansas Derby.
Was it Bodemeister?
It was. Yes. Good.
Ding 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 ding.
So yeah, you're better at that game than me.
From the 11 hole.
There you go. There's the vaunted JK memory getting tuned up for your big engagement in Las Vegas in what now? Just 3 weeks' time. Got some good news this week, Jonathan, from the muckety mucks at DRF. I am going to be permitted for NHC weekend to be on the radio with Steve Bick. This is assuming Steve Bick will have me and we can be providing some live coverage. Obviously, we'll be talking all about the goings-on out in Vegas and also everything happening over at tournaments.drf.com. That will be the first weekend of next year's campaign for the World Championship of Handicapping, which, of course, is going down Derby weekend. Expecting some announcements this week on how folks can buy into this year's WCH, which is February 3rd and 4th. That's going to be $1 million purse. Actually, $1 million assuming full participation. We'll have to see how many people buy in. Looks like we're going to have qualified about 70, which is a strong number. And then we'll see how many folks buy in. But I mean, it's going to be a strong purse. There's going to be no takeout. And it's a cool format with cut lines that I think really maximizes playing horses you like and eliminates the ability of somebody just to play long shots on the board and get there that way. I mean, granted, if you like long shots on the board and play them, you're going to be in great shape, but it's not a conducive format to quote unquote stabbing. Really looking forward to seeing what happens with that. Hopefully we'll have some other special promotion of the WCH along the way. But yeah, I'll be excited to be out there in Vegas with you. Has your before we get to this last Derby prep race we're going to talk about, has your preparation for that event begun? Are you, if the year you were alive for the $1 million bonus, your preparation level was a 10, and doing nothing at all would be a 0, what level of preparation are you anticipating this year?
I'm at about a 1.2 right now, and I don't envision that will go above 2.
Wow. So you're just going to go there. Now, but I know in the past, like one of our first interviews we ever did, you confessed to me, this was you must have won, maybe it was when you got your second entry late in the year in whatever that would have been, 2014. I didn't even know you that well. And I do remember you saying to me that the amount of work you put in doesn't always correlate to success. And that sometimes if you sort of just do the work as you're going with a fresher head, you've had more success. Do you still feel that way?
Yeah, there's zero method to the madness, right? I recall winning a Santa Anita seat earlier this year on DRF tournaments where I'm not joking you, I handicapped the races in like 6 minutes. I just hurried up and just blast through and just popped them in, and I won a seat. Very fortunate. I sound like another tournament player that always does that. I didn't even handicap the races, but I got lucky. I'm not saying that I'm that good. I just got lucky.
If you start complaining about your gout, we're gonna have a
exactly. Oh, I hope Nick's listening. He'll love that. And then there's been times where I've been super prepared and super ready to rock and roll, and I've done well, or I've done bad, or it doesn't make a difference. I prefer to be prepared And I will be. I'll get up early and I'll handicap. I'm just not going to go. I'm not going to go out of the way to get too far ahead of myself like I did previously, because then my brain just gets fatigued, and when it comes time for decision making, I'm just tired.
Yeah, keeping the brain nimble is really important in a multi-track Vegas contest where there's a lot of, it takes mental energy just to tune out the literal forget the figurative noise of all the stuff you hear when you're out there. There's the literal noise of being in a place, sitting in a ballroom. Kind of a nice thing about the WCH, just to get back to that for a minute, the fact that you can play in the comfort of your own man cave, war room, headphones on, comfort of home, whatever you want to call it. You can control that ability to control the environment. That's a topic worthy of probably a little bit of further exploration. And I do want to point out to people that when you're saying handicap in 6 minutes, the reason you can do that is the work that you're putting in, tripping races and putting in notes that appear automatically in the PPs when you pull them up. In other words, you're not getting a PDF of DRF Classic and handicapping in 6 minutes. You're looking at something that you've already put the time into as the races were happening, so you don't have to put as much time in. Yes.
But the other great cheat that you can do in those short times is Timeform US using the pace projector. There'll be races where it'll be coded blue or red, where blue obviously favoring horses near the lead, red favoring horses from off. And so what I'll do in those situations is, if it's favoring horses on the lead, I'll look at the 3 horses that are projected to be forward, and I'll just pick the best of those 3, and I won't even look at the other horses.
That's an interesting little shortcut.
And you can do the same from off the pace. You just find the 3 horses that are going to be coming from off of it, and you just pick the best of those 3, quickly clicking through. And I wouldn't recommend doing that every day. It's not really the most fun aspect of why it is that we play. However, sometimes you sign up or qualify for an event and life happens, and then you have to try to do something, and that's the shortcut that I take rather than Hurricane Anthony's approach of doing all ones.
Playing all the ones. I was glad to get to play that and interview again on the best of Hurricane Anthony. Been down in Australia. I'm sure he's going to come back with some stories. He'll be out at the NHC. He has his custom-made all the ones hats. I don't know how much he's selling them for. But yeah, just to make it clear, that strategy that JK just described, if you're talking about cash play, you're going to hemorrhage money doing that. But in a tournament situation, it makes a lot of sense, especially because, and this is a point made by sort of a controversial figure these days in the tournament world, but I'll give credit where it's due for a good idea. Eric Moomey, when I interviewed him for the Winning Contest Player all those years ago, pointed out that cap horses happen disproportionately in races that are either won wire to wire or complete and total pace meltdowns. So that little extra tool in Timeform US, pointing out races that are likely to have a fast pace or likely to favor horses on or near the lead, that could be a nice little clue. And I'd always suggest, obviously, if you have the time, vet that yourself. You'll find plenty of situations where your own handicapping doesn't agree with it, but more often than not, I would say, my own handicapping does agree with it, and it can be a way to come up with some situations. Bias work, another tremendous way to find those situations, a little bit different. As in bias work, you're not going to have somebody hand it to you on a silver platter the way it is on Timeform US, but something where you can identify a potentially chaotic situation on the day, or you can note that situation for the next time and then look for the horses that were either advantaged or favorites who were advantaged by a bias to bet against, live horses who were disadvantaged, who are better than they look on paper. All little ways to try to find the type of horses between, what would you say, 6-1 and 15-1 that come in very handy in these contest formats.
Yeah, no, those are the ones that when I think about cap, I don't find cap horses very often, and the ones that I usually find are wire-to-wire loose winners. The NHC, the cap horse I had on both entries in 2015 was a wire-to-wire horse. anytime I think back, it's always usually a wire-to-wire winner. I don't typically find the ones that are going to come from off the pace. I don't see those types of horses. They don't show up to me. I'm not much of a closer guy, so I miss those horses quite a bit.
We've talked about Nick Tamero on the show already, and he has a couple of times, and he has a great line. I think it was describing more you in that era than now. I feel like just from some of the conversations we've had on the show over time, you've evolved a bit, but it was something to the effect of, JK horseplay is a no closer zone, something like that. That made a lot of sense at the time. But that is some other players are fantastic with those horses we're going to show late speed. And actually, that's not a bad segue into our conversation for the Lecomte. Now, I managed to screw up the race somehow, but I feel like people listening, given that I was strong on the winner and the horse that ran fourth, and you were strong on the first and the second. I feel like somebody listening ought to have had this super, even if we screwed it up.
Yeah, somebody. I mean, not me. I know that. I was just playing in a tournament. I don't even know if I was pari-mutually involved in that race, but yeah, no, I think that it's one of those deals where not always do speed figures lead you to a fairly priced horse, but when they do, it's just like, golly, that was like free money. That horse was a standout on Timeform US. I think the horse had a 122. Instilled Regard. Instilled Regard, that's the name, right?
Yeah, Instilled Regard was the winner.
Yeah. 122 last time on Timeform, which suggested the horse was going to win by 2 like the horse did. And, you feel like you should be more, have more to show for it when it's over, when it seems that easy. But often that doesn't always translate.
It's one of the toughest things. You can have good handicapping thoughts, and connecting the dots on the betting side can still mess you up. You're right. That was probably fair value. The horse was a standout on Timeform. I thought that the horse that ended up running second, messing me up, Principe Guillerme, if I'm getting that right, who I thought on Timeform anyway looked a little dressed up, but ran pretty well. I mean, the race had even fractions. You can give Instilled Regard extra credit for being wide. And there were just a couple of aspects of this run, Jonathan, that I thought made him look particularly interesting. Not the least was the running style and the finish were just more so than the other performances on the weekend. They were very Derby-like to me. And we end up with a 92 Beyer speed figure, a 118 Timeform figure off the 119 speed rating. I was pretty impressed. This is a horse that definitely made me go more than any of the others I saw run on the weekend.
Yeah, no, I thought the horse ran well. And Hollendorfer, you feel like you have one that's in good hands with Jerry, and obviously we'll probably head back out west. And then depending on what Baffert throws at him out west, he could come back down to Fairgrounds for the follow up, which would be the Risen Star, or just maybe skip that one and come back for the Louisiana Derby, since he's shown ability to run over the surface. I think the horse is good moving forward, and the Timeform figures suggest that he's one that needs to be respected. So interesting to see what's going to happen with Javier. If Javier will stick, even if they start running out west, I think that will be interesting. You would imagine Javier will find himself on a Todd contender at some point. But following him a little bit could be a nice sign of how he felt about what he had underneath him, where Javier shows up. These guys don't mess around when it comes to Derby mounts. It's important to them. It's important to their careers. So following Javier here should lead to some insight on the horse's ability.
I like that. I like that angle to follow going forward. And of course, politics can play into that sometimes. But you're right. On the Derby trail, more often than not, the thing the jockey is going to be the most worried about is who gives me. Politics can be put aside sometimes because it's so important. Who's going to give me that best chance to be in that winner's circle on the first Saturday in May? So that's an angle we can follow here on the show. The horse I liked in there, Zing Zang, did end up fourth at a nice big number. Should have been a nice reverse super key for me. The thing about this horse is I couldn't help but notice he did all his running in the stretch, in the long fairground stretch, and I'm starting to wonder if he's not the type of horse that Craig Mokowski and the Timeform team label as a plotter. And basically, that the definition of the plotter is the horse that does the running in the stretch as opposed to getting going earlier on the turn. And these horses typically, as Craig has described on this very show, are often very bad bets to win. But that doesn't mean that they're bad betting vehicles in terms of these reverse trifecta and superfecta keys that we've talked about on the show a lot and that Mike talks about extensively in betting with an edge. Do you, when you're thinking, I don't know if I didn't tell you I was going to ask you about Zing Zang, and you might not have anticipated this question, JK, but I mean, do you fall in one camp or another? I mean, is this an improving horse who can finish, who could be heard from as the distances get longer, or is this a horse who's going to be, being used third and fourth a lot?
No, I mean, absolutely. Like we said earlier, there's no reason to make Derby lists because these horses are progressive types that continue on. I mean, Creator is one that sticks to mind. That I think he was running races like this early in his career, like kind of, nondescript fourths, and as they got a little bit further, as the paces started to quicken up a little bit, he started to find himself with some opportunities to win. I'll tell you what, I've never been so proud of picking a horse to run eighth. In Night Strike, who was 97-1. When was the last time you've ever heard me mention a horse that's going to be 97-1? I'm evolving as a horse player, it seems.
I like it. As soon as you get that bet where you have to pick the first 8 in order, you'd have had a perfect bottom-up kick.
Exactly. But the fact that he didn't finish fast and finished last, and honestly, I'm just surprised that I picked a horse that ended up going off 97-1.
Was there a trip? Was there any excuse? Was there any reason to expect improvement, or do you think what you see is what you get?
No, I don't think there was much of a trip. Save ground on both turns. Maybe longer is better, but I mean, I don't think the horse is ever going to win a race that of this caliber, but interesting nonetheless.
Doesn't mean course couldn't be dangerous on a class drop somewhere along the line. So maybe one worth noting in your DRF stable mail. Few other things to talk about. Let's do the book question first. There was an interesting conversation on Twitter. Jason Dew, who I had the pleasure of meeting at Keeneland and I've enjoyed interacting with online, had a comment that I didn't know whether to laugh or cry when I read his tweet. Let me see if I can find the actual tweet. If not, I'll just give it the synopsis. And the synopsis is that the Maloney book is great, but I'm so intimidated by the amount of work this guy does. I'm thinking about finding another hobby, something like that. And I said back, like, well, that definitely wasn't the idea. But in the subsequent conversation, a few people chimed in also about being intimidated by the fact that, here's Mike, this guy looking at, 4 to 7 tracks on a given day, and how can I ever compete with that? And my answer, and I just didn't really get into it on Twitter because it's a 140 character problem. Well, I guess longer now, but you know what I mean. You don't have to, I would say, especially for the recreational player, the weekend warrior, the non-professional of any kind, you take these techniques and you apply them to your circuit. I mean, doing trips, even doing figures for one circuit is not a crazy thing for a horse player to be able to have to find time to do. And if you're not making figures, I'm a big believer in the idea that you can learn a lot simply by comparing figures. Go back and look at the Beyer versus Timeform, note the pace scenarios, include stuff like that in your trip notes. You're going to have a chance to be ahead of the game. You don't have to do exactly what Mike is outlining in the book. And I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, that's what works for him at his level. But, it's a good idea to understand the process that goes into being a professional player. But it's not binary. It's not you do that or you do zero. You got to find the level of work that's going to fit into your lifestyle. And I mean, I think there's no better advice on that front than focusing on a particular circuit. How do you do it, JK? give me a little bit of a rundown on your thoughts.
Yeah, well, from the beginning of my horse playing life, I've just always wanted to listen and try to grab little pieces just to put them in my brain, add them to the toolbox, and hopefully they'll come out when I need them. And so that's what I would tell people about this book, is that it is an outline for how you could play this game professionally, how you could make a living doing it, and it covers it from the mental part of it to relationships to money management to handicapping techniques. So that's the good part about it. The second part is like, yeah, it is a daunting task, and most of us aren't going to take it on in that full-time platform. However, if you will just take little pieces from what Mike and Pete provide in the book, it'll just make you a better player. And let's face it, you're going to keep playing, at least casually or as a weekend warrior. And to have some of that information at your disposal will only make you better and only increase your chances of success on those weekends or big days or whatever it is that you're doing.
I think I said Jason Dew before. It's Justin Dew, of course, and he can be found on Twitter at Justin Dew. Lots of interesting comments on racing. So yeah, just wanted to make sure I got that out there. I had forgotten about this one, but somebody threw this one out there, JK. Does Ferenzi Fire have a chance to be this year's practical joke? Should we be lining up to bet him in the King's Bishop? Of course, now Alan Jerkins, but this commenter said King's Bishop.
I want to see a horse kind of range up and not find in a mile and an eighth type of race before I start running to the can we cut you back decision. That was kind of what practical joke was to me. He would always be in position, loom like he was going to run by horses, and then he would kind of stop. So I'm not ready to make that assessment. However, I wouldn't criticize anyone for being ready to make it.
Somebody wants to know, JK, if when you do your next appearance on Out of the Gate, instead of having a dimly lit video of you in a baseball cap, if there could just be a giant egg emoji.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you talk to Craig about that. I'm sure Craig can make that happen. Yeah. I don't even know where I filmed my last one. Where did I film my last Out of the Gate?
I saw it in the studio. I was in studio with Dan Illman. So I saw you, but I didn't hear you. I understand you gave out the same tip as me that did not work out very well at the fairgrounds on Saturday, and that was heavenly love. Did you see any excuse there when you watched the video?
You know what? To be honest, I don't know if I've even seen that race yet. I was traveling on that day during that time, and I think I might have missed that one. I did watch the Lecomte, but I hadn't seen. I think maybe I talked to you about it, or maybe you told me that she didn't really have an excuse.
Yeah, there was a little bit of trouble on the turn, maybe, but it was a no fine situation. But we'll have to see. Off the layoff can be tricky, but it certainly wasn't what I was expecting, and it wasn't encouraging. I can give you that much.
Hey, Pete, before I forget, and this is a production meeting inside the show. You had a question last week from someone. You forwarded it to me. We were going to talk about. And it was about what app I use on the iPad Pro.
Yeah, I had that teed up here actually as one of the next things to talk about. Why don't you go ahead and take it?
So the one that I found that I really like is it's called PTF Expert. So it's a red icon. So I know a lot of these have the same similar names, but it's a red icon with kind of like an eye, half of an eye, white eye on it. Eye on your face, not I in the alphabet. Anyways, I love it. It's great for a couple of reasons. One of the things is, I'm an Apple user and I have an iCloud account, like a small storage iCloud account. And one of the things that I've done is if you can download a PDF to your computer, you can drag it to that file, and then it becomes accessible right from your iPad and through that app. So that's one of the coolest things. And then the other part about it is that if you make edits on your iPad on a document, say, the PPs from Aqueduct over the weekend, you can do all your notes on it, and then you'll have that on your desktop of your computer as well. So if you're flying for some reason, your iPad battery dies, you can still access all of the notes that you did because it saves to the cloud. And so the workflow there, the accessibility of getting your file in different formats really works. You can also get it on your phone too. So if you run to the window and you want to look and see, but you left your iPad at the table, you can grab it on your phone too. So PDF Expert has been good. That's the one that I prefer.
Excellent. We had a question here. It's very long and involved, and I don't want to read the whole thing for fear of losing people, but I'm going to try to get to the crux of it. This one is from Nicholas Erdman. And he starts off just by saying he feels like his handicapping has regressed over the past 2 years, and he's looking to get back on track, and he's seeking advice for us. He goes on to describe, he's a winning DFS player, daily fantasy player, in a variety of different sports, football, baseball, and golf. But that's been keeping him afloat. But horse racing is his passion. He does find that his best scores have come via trip handicapping and replays. He has a bunch of ideas, and this is where we get a little too into the weeds to read the whole thing here, about in another extensive way to take notes. And he just sort of wants some advice from us on how to get back on track, I guess, to find a situation where he can single a 10-1 in a pick 5 with confidence. And so a few things come to my mind, and let me go first, JK, and you can think about, you can build off what I have to say. Right away, I hear about singling a 10-1 in a pick 5, and I'm thinking, well, for me, like, that's well and good, but if you're in a slump, decrease your level of difficulty. And you decrease your level of difficulty not with the pick 5, but with the pick 1, the win bet. And if you're going to get a little funky with it, the double or the exacta. I'm not saying you can't still take like a little shot in a harder to hit bet. It might be a way to get you back up and running in a hurry. But I would be very conscious of reducing the degree of difficulty wherever possible. And I could tell from the part of this email I did not read that Nick, I'm going to call him Nick. I'm assuming Nicholas likes Nick. Maybe he likes Nicholas. Who knows? But I'm assuming either way that you're a person clearly who doesn't mind doing legwork. And you say so right in the note. And to me, that's a beautiful thing because it gives you sort of something to do while following the races. A lot of people are action junkies to the point where, they're just going to spend money if they're sitting watching the races. I have found, I'm going to go so far as to say the only times I've ever been successful paying attention. I can go to the track and socialize and not bet and not really follow the races. If I'm following the races, if I'm handicapping the races, unfortunately, I'm sick enough that I'm going to pretty much bet. However, if I'm in the midst of a project like tripping the races as they're happening, or thinking about doing some preliminary figure making and copying down fractions, or basically giving myself some activity to do related to the races, those are times when I've been able to lay off of betting and just focus, just treat it like R&D, research and development. Nick seems to be somebody who enjoys the R&D aspect of it, and to me, that's that could be really valuable. Put your energy, keep following, put your energy into that, and just take a break from the wagering side, and then get back into it slowly but surely, starting with simpler bets and then expanding. Gosh, I can't believe how many times he's come up, but in the Maloney book, the idea is you earn the right to bet more. And then he also points out, and I think this is a great idea, he's going to eliminate making action bets. Looking at his records, he's nickel and diming himself to death with action bets, and it's important to him, his goal as a horse player, to be profitable. So, and I mean, I think that goes hand in hand with what I was just saying. Like, don't, especially when you're not going well, don't action bet. If you get to a point where your confidence is high, where you're seeing the ball really well, you're maybe attuned to hot and cold trainers and biases and things that give you enough of an edge, maybe at some point you can go back to having action bets as long as they're significantly less than your prime bets. That's a problem of mine, is when I'm going well and allowing myself to action bet, my action bet's maybe a third of my prime bet, and it should be like a tenth or even less, really. You need to bet more where you know you're getting your money in good than situations where you're just having a bet. And it's something that I still struggle with to this day as a player. So you want to be wary of that. But if you're in a position where you're not going well and you can eliminate action bets altogether, I mean, I think that's a no-brainer. Any other thoughts from you, JK, on how Nick can get himself back on track?
Yeah, I actually have a couple. The first one is Nick has expressed his success in DFS and daily fantasy. I think the closest correlation that we have to that would be the all-in tournaments, the pick and pray tournaments, the lockdown tournaments that we have. Idea. And I think that's maybe an area in which he could excel with some of the skills that he's picked up, in daily fantasy. So that would be another way, I think, to maybe get off the snide a little bit, is to kind of get away from those pari-mutuel pools. And I'll talk about why I think that's important too at this time of year. But find a way to participate just in some tournaments, the matchup tournaments, the head-to-heads. Those are all extremely beneficial. So those are ones that I think that he could probably jump in and find some success. The other thing is, yesterday, I mentioned going to lunch with Sean Borman and Craig Bernick, and Craig brought up a great point that this time of the year is tough because, like, who's playing Aqueduct in the winter? Who's playing Laurel? And who's playing, Oaklawn and Fairgrounds?
Hardcore.
It's significantly informed people. It's players that that know what they're doing. There's no weekend vacation at Saratoga. There's no rich guy with champagne at Del Mar. I mean, there's no. These guys aren't participating in these pools, and the money is smart, and the pools are harder. And so if you're struggling, this is probably not the time of the year to find your groove, in my opinion. And so maybe grab the reins a little bit and jump into some of those contests that your skill set has shown that you'll have a high likelihood of success in.
That's awesome advice. I really like that. One exception I might say, though, JK, is about Oaklawn, and not because there aren't really sharp people playing there, but there is the fact that, and I don't exactly know how this works, but I know that the computer robotic wagering players, the CRW players, sometimes just called the computer groups, access to those pools is limited. And I do know there are a lot of professional horse players I've talked to. In fact, I think just about every one tell me that they do pretty well at Oaklawn. They have an advantage, presumably because the pools aren't quite as efficient with not as much computer money in there. Now, early in the meet, from what I've seen down there, it's looked pretty chaotic. So, maybe letting that meet develop a little bit and find its form might not be a bad idea. But if I were gonna look at a track this time of year, Oaklawn would be a one I would seriously consider. I've just heard too many players say that old school type of work and handicapping can do really well there. Is that something you've ever noticed? Do you like betting Oaklawn?
Yeah, I don't mind it at all. I find it to be very difficult. A lot of horses shipping in. I feel a little bit. I struggle. I feel a little in the dark when I'm in a place that doesn't have a workout report. Not that I can't do it. I just feel more comfortable when it exists. They don't have those there, so that's tough as well. So, I can do okay there, but it's a tough place in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, different strokes for different folks, and that problem of the shippers and the local form, that would be obviated by getting started a little bit later in the meet when horses have, more horses anyway, have had a run over the surface. But yeah, I mean, it's always, we talk about it mostly in terms of contests where a different, one player's skill set, and it sounds like Nick might be one of them, very well suited to like an all-in mythical money contest for various reasons. The downside is completely limited. That you can't chase if you want to. That's one thing Vic Stauffer has told me many times has been the big difference between, and these are his words, that he was an unsuccessful cash player and then one of the most successful tournament players of the last few years, because tournaments limit the downside. You can't get into trouble by chasing. So if chasing is a problem, yeah, the tournament's definitely an area you want to get involved in. If you're worried about just being in a bad streak, I think the principle is similar. You sort of know exactly what you're getting into, and that downside is limited. Some players are going to be well advantaged by playing in live bankroll contests. It just depends on what your skill set is. And tracks, I think, are the same way. Some players love maidens and turf races, and that's going to lead you to very different meets than a Brent Sumja type. Brent, who qualified for the World Championship of Handicapping last weekend, by the way, JK. I don't know if you saw that.
I didn't. Congratulations to our friend who doesn't like me.
That's just a rumor. He'll I keep trying to get him to come on the show, but he's being uncharacteristically shy. I don't know why, but he will be part of the WCH. He will be out there in Vegas. We'll get a chance to hang out with him. He's a bread and butter claimer, loves to read the sheets, loves to think like a trainer, like he was for so many years. And so for him, he's going to be looking to very different type of races and race meets than that other player. So, I mean, a huge part of the game in 6 Secrets of Successful Bettors, we talk about it. It's not just handicapping the horses. It's not just handicapping the races. It's handicapping yourself. In poker, they call it game selection, and figuring out, where you're going to be putting your money, that it could be in good. And, for me, my very brief foray into poker, during the poker boom, actually, thanks to my friends at the Daily Racing Forum, really got involved in playing more poker and writing more about poker. And during the poker boom, I've told this story before, so apologies if you've heard it, but I could go to Atlantic City and, Las Vegas. I could make good money playing against a lot of people who'd seen the game on TV and didn't really understand how to play. And I mean, to the point where you'd see people playing limit poker, a purely mathematical game, as if it were no limit, like trying to bluff in situations where it was just completely impractical. And, I've got the nuts and, they're just throwing money in my direction. It was wonderful. I began to think, I wrote a couple books about poker, one for DRF, one for, I think it was Broadway Books, called The Poker Aficionado, which, you can find probably in some dark corner of the internet still. But I began to think I was pretty good at poker. And as the poker boom dried up and I was playing against better and better players, I realized something very humbling. I wasn't very good at poker. I was very average at poker. My game selection had been off the charts good when I was doing well. And I think about that a lot in terms of gambling and different gambling situations I've been in over the years. It's not just about how good you are. It's about sort of the economic conditions of the market you're in. Same player could be the biggest shark or the biggest fish, and it all comes down to game selection. I think it's the exact same thing with horse racing, with the caveat that most of the situations are pretty difficult. But I will say in the tournament world, I still believe you can find some situations where you can really have an edge. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like we talked about earlier in the show. If you can continue to expand on your game with things like Mike's book, Betting with an Edge, and other things too. Not just that. I mean, obviously, if you've never read Buyer on Speed, you need to go ahead and grab that. If you haven't read, Betting Thoroughbreds in the 21st Century, The Winning Contest Player, a million different things, Exotic Betting by Steve Christ, all these things. If you can add to your arsenal, it just gives you a better chance of being successful and still finding an edge. And you might not be a type of player that maintains that edge throughout, but if you can find that edge on certain days, you could still have an opportunity to be a winning horse player, at least a break-even habit, a hobby player, So I think that you should always be trying to grow, and listening to shows like this are always a good starting point just to hear some different perspectives, right or wrong.
I hope so. Right. I mean, even if you think we're a couple of, goons, it's, there's value in listening to other people's opinions and then helping form your own around them. Another tool I'd mention, drf.com/YouTube, the great videos that the guys do Dan Illman, Matt Bernier, Mike Beer, previewing and reviewing all the big races. If you're a novice player tuning in and you want to see things a different way and get a chance to get a perspective on how hardened, successful, sharp, I guess is the word I'm really looking for, horse players look at the world, watch those guys work. It's all up there, drf.com/YouTube. Time for one more quick one, JK, and then I think we're going to have to kiss goodbye. This show number 301 of the DRF Players Podcast. This one comes from Tim Doherty. I feel that an understanding of a handicapper's opinion confidence is a critical part of becoming a profitable horse player. We all come across horses in a month or meet in which we have such a high opinion that they become proverbial locks. Yet because of many factors such as bankroll restrictions or apprehension on wagering too much on a single horse, we fail to weight our month or meet's wagering handle accordingly and miss potential profits relative to our opinion. Frank Mustari, noted contest player, put me onto this strategy at the Hawthorne tournament back in March of 16. And ever since, I've tried to be cognizant of it as I handicap in today's world of super efficient exotic pools flooded with efficient computer-generated tickets. I found one of the few remaining edges for the traditional handicapper is to use confidence as a factor to outperform the takeout. My theory is I feel if I'm 20% more confident than the average dollar in the pool on one selection, then I have an edge and should wager my dollar accordingly. What do you think of that idea, Jonathan?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's what we all try to do in a non-mathematical way, right? Like I'm always thinking, like, okay, what if you're a guy that at your max you'll bet $100 to win on a horse, and at your base you'll bet $10 to win. Well, when is the right time to bet 60? Like how? And I don't think a lot of people do anything to represent that numerically. It sounds as if he has, and I think there is something to that. It's a lot of math for me. It takes a lot of the feel away from it, which is fine. But I think there's something to it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a gambling game with a high takeout, it reminds me of a question Carrie Photius asked me when I was. It was actually an interview I did with him somewhat randomly. It ended up getting published in the Saratoga Special. But I think it was even before I worked for the Special when I did the interview. And it ended up being the genesis of 6 Secrets of Successful Bettors, because sitting down with a professional horse player for an afternoon was just set my mind on fire with like, oh my gosh, I got to meet more of these guys and understand the way they think. In many ways, it was the launch of my career in this area. The late, great Carrie Photius of Equiform fame once wrote a book called Blinkers Off that has some very interesting ideas about pace in it. But Carrie said, let's say you're in a casino and you're playing for your life and you have, it's one hand of blackjack, like for your life, essentially. You have the opportunity to play blackjack and you have to win if you want to survive or something like that. And maybe it wasn't blackjack. Maybe it was a game where you couldn't get an edge, where there was just a built-in house edge. And the question was, what's the right way to do it? How much do you bet? And the answer is you bet as much as you can on essentially one flip of the card. If you're in a situation where you can't be getting the best of it, the more you play, the more the edge is going to grind you out. And I think it makes me think of this question because I think there's something similar. If you just keep sort of playing your okay opinions, it's going to be a lot harder to make money than if you just bet it all on your best opinion every day. Now, few of us as horse players are going to be disciplined enough to do that. I recognize that. But to take that principle of being able to find a situation that you're the most comfortable with and bet close to it all anyway in that one situation, I mean, that sounds to me like a way of getting the best of it. What do you think?
No, we talked about that before when people ask, what do I do with my $200 budget on a day at Saratoga? And my answer typically is bet it all on the pick 5. It's got the lowest takeout. It's got the highest reward to a certain extent. There's usually a couple manageable races early in the day rather than the really confusing and difficult ones that are a little bit later along the way. So, That's how I would rather operate. I'd rather make one bet than 15 bets, and I feel like I have a better shot of hitting one than I do of hitting enough of the 15 to make money.
It makes sense. All right, we are just about out of time here, JK. I want to thank you for finding time while you're traveling to do the show and all your excellent insights. As usual, I want to thank producer Craig. I want to thank producer AJ. I want to thank Travis Stone. I want to thank Willie Nile, who provides our theme song. For more of his music, go to willienile.com. We will be back on Friday. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your photos.